surrounded by like. I need to show you.
Okay. So I wanted to, this class is going to be something you've been studying actually at the dorm. So maybe this will be either a review or some new insight into the things you've been studying. And that is an overview over the 7 generations of the Rebbeim of Chabad. So I want to give an introduction. And that is that, generally speaking, the definition of a chassid involves 3 things. Of course, when we say 3 things, that's in a general way, but there are many details. It's like you say, oh, there's only 39 things that you're not allowed to do on Shabbos. Then when you start learning the Shulchan Aruch, there's 3,900 things. Many details. So here, so there's only 3 things basically that define a chassid. One thing is studying chassidus, inner, deeper, mystical part of the Torah. The second thing is the avodah, working self-refinement, which is mainly accomplished through tefillah, through davening. A Hasidic way of davening is about self-refinement, becoming a more refined person, refining my character traits, my mind, my heart. And the third thing is, a chassid is a person who's mukusher to the Rebbe, connected to the Rebbe. And anyone who has only 1 or 2 of the 3 things is not really a chassid in the full sense. You need one, the other, and all 3 are necessary. And generally speaking, it's because Chassidus and learning Chassidus and the davening, it's all about bringing godliness into my life, into the world. By learning about Hashem, I'm bringing godliness into my head. By davening the Chassidic way of davening, I'm bringing godliness into my heart. And once I bring it into my heart, and I bring it into all my character traits. But the one through which godliness is revealed in this world is through tzaddikim in general, and it's each chassid through his Rebbe. So therefore, there has to be the connection to the Rebbe in order for the chassidus to accomplish what it's supposed to, in order for the davening to accomplish what it's supposed to. So a very major part of everything in chassidus is basically the inyan of iskashrus to the Rebbe. Iskashrus is the Hebrew word which means the bond between a chassid and a Rebbe. And the bond between a chassid and a Rebbe is not only academic. The Rebbe is my teacher. The Rebbe is my guide. He gives me advice how to progress and advance in my Yiddishkeit. But the Rebbe and chassid relationship is also a relationship of love, where the love that we find that the Rebbe has to a chassid is something unparalleled, and the love of a chassid to a Rebbe is something unparalleled. And that is something which we'll have to talk at another time. But because of that, today we want to talk about the 7 generations of Chabad, which is sometimes compared to, I use the analogy of the Menorah, which has 7 branches. Just like the Menorah has 7 branches, the Chabad dynasty is made up of these 7 branches. So when you talk about Chassidus and the history of Chassidus and the Rebbes, is broken up, generally speaking, into 2 parts. One part is called Chassidus HaKlolis, general Chassidus, and the other is Chassidus Chabad, it's related to us. So the general Chassidus is, did I give out a sheet? Not again, okay. Mrs. Yafi, you hear us with your Ruach HaKodesh. I know you hear us. She hears me. No, she can't make copy with this. I hope she has the cup downstairs. Do you have this sheet with all the Rebbes, the 7 generations? What? You gave it to me. You want to see if it's on my desk? I left the door open. I'm sorry. I think what happens is I bring up the sheets, but on the way somewhere, as I'm walking, they just disappear. It's one of the miracles.
We know the truth.
So the first 2 generations was called General Chassidus. It's not specifically Chabad. That's these 2, the Baal Shem Tov and his successor, the Maggid Mezrich, they introduced Chassidus to the world in a general way. And that's why in that generation, the first and the second, there was only one specific path, which was the Baal Shem Tov, and then the Maggid Mezrich. And there weren't branches, different branches of Chassidus. When did the branches of Chassidus begin? After the passing of the Maggid Mezrich. The Maggid Mezrich had 120 students that were great Hasidic giants and masters of Chassidus. They spread out throughout Europe and in Israel, and each one taught Chassidus in their way. They're all from the same source. It's hard to imagine, all from the same source, and well, they went in so many different directions. It's different directions, of course, you're looking at it on the outside, but in truth, there's much more that brings all the Hasidim together than what separates them. Okay, if we can give it out. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
So it's interesting. Everyone knows that in Gemara, one of the things that is considered 2 opinions that very often are oppose each other is Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, right? Everybody knows those 2 names? The house of Shammai, the house of Hillel. The house of Shammai, the sage who was the sort of the founder of that yeshiva, his name was Shammai. And the sage that found the other yeshiva was Hillel. And guess what? Shammai and Hillel went to the same yeshiva themselves, and they had the same teachers. And yet, from them branched out 2 different approaches in Torah, in learning, and that's the different schools of thought that we find in the Gemara. So here too, the source is the same, and so many principles of Chassidus is the same in all Chassidic groups. In the particulars, there are different paths, but that started in the 3rd generation. So the 3rd generation are the students of the Maggid, and there were 120 students. The Alter Rebbe was the youngest of all the 120. And he's the founder of Chabad. So we'll go a little bit into the different Rebbes, a little bit of the history of each one, just to get an overview. So the Alter Rebbe, when he was born, his parents gave him a name, Schneier Zalman. But there's a history to this, which we'll give over briefly. And that is that the Baal Shem Tov said that there are 2 types of souls that come to this world. One is called a neshama chadasha, which means a new soul. It's a soul that never, ever descended yet. It's first time around. Most of the neshamas, almost all of them, are souls that have been here already and will come down another time or another time or another time to complete what hasn't been completed the previous times. So it's assumed that most souls, means 99.99% of the neshamas, are all sort of neshamas that have been here and have more work to do. Baal Shem Tov said that the Alter Rebbe's neshama is a new neshama. Actually, he spoke about it even before the Alter Rebbe came to him. When he was born, the Baal Shem Tov spoke about it, and he said there's a new neshama that came into this world, and this neshama, new neshama, has a very special mission. And when the Alter Rebbe was named on the day of his bris milah, the circumcision, even though he lived in a different place, he knew the name and he spoke about the name. And he said he's called Shnei Or because it means two lights. And he's going to light up the world with two brilliant lights. And those two lights are in the inner part of Torah and the revealed part of Torah. So in the hidden part of Torah, it's Tanya. In the revealed part of Torah, the Alter Rebbe wrote the Shulchan Aruch. Now, there was a Shulchan Aruch that was written before the Alter Rebbe. And in fact, there was more than one. The first code of Jewish law that was written was by the Rambam. The second code of Jewish law that was written was by the Tur. That was what it's called. And the third one was by the Beis Yosef, or Rabbi Yosef Cairo. But each generation, after the code of law was written, there were so many commentaries on how to explain it and different opinions and what would be in this situation, what would be in that situation. So every generation that came later sort of went through all these commentators and wrote what they thought is going to be the actual practical halacha. And that's what the Alter Rebbe did, compiled from everything that was written before, and he wrote the Shulchan Aruch. The fact that he wrote the Shulchan Aruch was a mission given to him by the Maggid Mezritch. And that's in the revealed part of Torah. These are the two things. So, to go over briefly, when the Alter Rebbe, he was born in the year, it says on that first sheet, what year he was born. And when did the Alter Rebbe start the sort of the path of Chabad? He started it yet when he was still a student of the Maggid. He already formed the sort of the seeds for what is going to be the approach of Chabad. And that's learning Chassidus in a way that you can understand that what you learn with Chochmah and Bina and Endas. In the Alter Rebbe's times, there was tremendous opposition, especially in Lithuania. The Alter Rebbe was from Lithuania, and he lived in Lithuania, and he was spreading Chassidus in Lithuania, and there was tremendous opposition, and they were all great Torah scholars. What the Alter Rebbe did was he organized debates, or other people organized them. In other words, it was a public debate where great Torah scholars would challenge the Alter Rebbe with questions. Why are you doing this? And why are you doing that? And how do you explain this? And how do you explain that? But part of the debate was, first we have to have a debate just in Torah. Let's see if you're a Torah scholar. Otherwise, we don't even want to talk to you. And they all saw the Alter Rebbe was a brilliant, brilliant Torah scholar. Many of them asked him questions that they struggled with for years, and he answered those questions. And as a result of these debates, tens of thousands of students eventually became Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe. Yes, we know there were stories of miracles that were performed, and through the miracles, people became Chassidim. But for the most part, it wasn't miracles that made them Chassidim. It was simply learning and understanding and recognizing what Chassidus has to offer. The Alter Rebbe lived in a city called Lozhne, and after the Alter Rebbe was arrested and freed from jail, 2 years later, he was arrested a second time. And this time, due to the circumstances, a lot of details, that he ended up leaving Lozhne and going to a different city, which is called Ladi. And that's where he lived. He lived in Ladi until close to the time that he passed. And what happened was that in that time, the war broke out between Russia and France. And the Alter Rebbe was determined that France should lose the war and Russia should win the war. The Alter Rebbe said that Napoleon is a giant of a klipa. And if he wins the war, the whole world will be infested with his ideology, which is not to believe in Hashem and just to believe in leading a liberal life. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe said he doesn't even want to be under his rule even for one moment. And he left Ladi. He burnt the house down where he lived. And he basically went on a trip, on a journey, looking for a new place to live and running away from Napoleon's army. Again, to be brief, because in a few weeks we'll have the day the Alter Rebbe passed, I'll tell the story in more detail. Napoleon was a sorcerer. And with the power of sorcery, he recognized that the Alter Rebbe is fighting him, and he tried to capture the Alter Rebbe. And Alter Rebbe was on the run. And this was in the cold, wintry nights. Ultimately, this led to the Alter Rebbe becoming sick, and then eventually he passed away. So really, the last thing that happened in his life was this war with Napoleon and doing everything he can physically and spiritually that Napoleon should be defeated. And the Alter Rebbe was buried in a place called Hadich. Today people go to visit Hadich. So that's number one. In terms of the Alter Rebbe's writings, everyone knows about Tanya, but there's two other Sfarim that are also, they stand out. One is called Torah Or, and the other one is called the Kuti Torah. And these are Sfarim that have a mimer on every parsha of the week, which means explaining the parsha according to Chassidus. This week is Vayeshev. Beautiful story that you read in the parsha, but the story has tremendous depth to it. And in Torah Or, it gives the Hasidic insight into all the details of the story. And, and for this reason, the Tanya is referred to as the written Torah of Hasidus. On the other hand, these two Sfarim, Torah Or and the Kuti Torah, is like the oral Torah of Hasidus. All the Rebbes of Chabad in all future generations, when they spoke about the Parsha of the week and explained it with Hasidic explanation, they would draw from the teachings, the Alter Rebbe, in these two books, Torah Or and the Kuti Torah. The Alter Rebbe had 6 children, 3 sons and 3 daughters. And the oldest of his sons is the one that became the next Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe. The Alter Rebbe lived to the age of 68. And Alter Rebbe was physically actually very strong and very healthy, but just because of all the difficulty that he went through and he had to go through, took away a lot of the years of his health. So let's go to the second generation of Chassidus, which was the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe, which was the oldest son of the Alter Rebbe, and let me just again throw this in by the way, but it's something we have to talk about in more detail. Sometimes people wonder how come the leadership always goes to a family member. It's as if the family is in control, like only they can be, why can't it be a student? So the answer is the basis and the source for a family member becoming the next Rebbe is actually a pasuk in Chumash, and it's actually a halacha. The halacha is that any leader of Jewry that passes on, whether it be a king or just a leader of a community, if his son is qualified to fill his space, then he has to be appointed before anyone else. If he's not qualified, then you look for someone amongst the students. If he's not qualified, then you can also look for the son-in-law of that person. But for example, Moshe Rabbeinu had a son, more than one son, but they weren't qualified to be in his place, and Hashem chose Yoshua to be his successor. Yep.
Were there any books written by Maggid and Moshe or were the first Hasidic books?
So there are 2 books. I don't think they were actually written by them, but these 2 books documented their teachings. The Baal Shem Tov's book is called Keser Shem Tov. Keser means the crown. In Pirkei Avos it says that there are 4 crowns, and one of them is called Keser Shem Tov, a crown of a good name. So that became the name of his book, the book which it compiles all his teachings, Keser Shem Tov. And that's the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid is another pasuk, Maggid Dvarav Liyakov. This pasuk in Tehillim, we say it in davening. That's the name of his book, and also it's called Torah Or. In fact, that you brought it up now, what?
It's called Maggid.
Maggid Dvarav Liyakov. Dvarav, Hashem relates his words to Jacob. Maggid Dvarav Liyakov. It's in davening, one of the parts after Ashrei. So Friedrich Rebbe once said that every chassid should have in his home these 3 books: Keser Shem Tov, Maggid Dvarav Liyakov, and Tanya. These are the first 3 generations of Chassidus. Now the Mittel Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Chabad, we spoke a little bit about him because we just had celebrated his day of passing, his birthday, the day he's released from jail. One of the things we did not mention was that at the age of, first of all, the age of 14, he was married, 14 years old. In those days, it was a little bit more common. At the age of 16, the Alter Rebbe appointed him to be like the mashpia over the other Hasidim that he had, the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe is also the one that settled in the city of Lubavitch. We know Chabad Hasidim are called Lubavitch Hasidim. Lubavitch is the city. In fact, all Hasidim probably are named by their cities. If you heard Hasidim called Belz Hasidim, because they come from the city of Belz. Vizhnitz Hasidim, they come from Vizhnitz. Satmar Hasidim, they come from Satmar. And Kloisenberg Hasidim come from a city called Kloisenberg. Bavim is from a city called Bavim. All Hasidim are named by that. And Lubavitch is the city where Lubavitch Hasidim settled. But the first Rebbe to go live in that city as a Rebbe was the Mittel Rebbe. This was after the war with Napoleon was over, and the Alter Rebbe's city was destroyed, and his house was destroyed. So they looked for a new place to settle, and Mittel Rebbe settled in the city of Lubavitch. The Mittel Rebbe also did something which was a first, and that is that he asked a group of Hasidim to move and live in Eretz Yisrael, specifically to the city of Hebron. And from that point on, I mean, the Alter Rebbe, sent money to support the families in Eretz Yisrael, which means we'll find that every Rebbe of Chabad was involved in supporting Eretz Yisrael. Started with the Alter Rebbe through money. The Mittel Rebbe already sent a group of people to go there. And in fact, one of the people that he sent was his own daughter, which you might probably know, that this daughter is the ancestor of the Baumgarten family, the Groner family, which is Mrs. Ruddle that lives in the dorm. Her great-grandmother, whose name was Menucha Rochel, she was the daughter of the Mittel Rebbe that she and her husband went there and they settled in Hebron. The Mittel Rebbe had 2 sons and he had 6 daughters. One of his daughters married the 3rd Rebbe of Chabad, which was the Tzemach Tzedek. 8 daughters he had, sorry. And again, we spoke about this at length, so I won't go into it now, that the Mittel Rebbe in his generation, he spread Chassidus out in a way which was much more than in the times of the Alter Rebbe. And he was very much into people going out and teaching Chassidus and spreading Chassidus. And therefore he was compared to a river, compared to the Alter Rebbe was like a wellspring. The 3rd Rebbe of Chabad is the Tzemach Tzedek. And there's a lot of history behind the Tzemach Tzedek. But I guess one of the things which should definitely be mentioned is that it's Tzemach Tzedek's mother, who was a daughter of the Mittel Rebbe. She was a great tzedekis, and her name was Dvorah Leah. And in a sense, the fact that we have what we have in Chassidus is thanks to her. The reason is because I'm sure it was brought up in class, but I definitely spoke about it in level 2, that the fact that there was so much opposition against the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus was not only because there were people here that misunderstood, didn't get it, they thought it was something negative, but the reason was because in heaven, in the heavenly court, there was opposition against spreading Chassidus. That Chassidus is something which is very deep and very holy. These are the inner secrets of Torah. And for all the generations, it was kept that way, very quiet, and it was only studied by selected people. And therefore, the fact that the Alter Rebbe took it out of its hiding place and is making it accessible to everybody and anybody, they were prosecuting angels against the Alter Rebbe, saying that this is something inappropriate. And there was a certain point where the Alter Rebbe told his daughter, Rebbe Dvorah Leah, that he sees that he won't be able to continue doing what he's doing. And probably his life will end this year because of his spreading Hasidus. He's not going to stop, but he sees that this will cost him his life. And when she found out about it, she found a way that spiritually she would replace the Alter Rebbe, let her life be taken away, and the Alter Rebbe should continue to do what he's doing. She took it upon herself the day before Rosh Hashanah. 2 days later, she became sick. And the next day, she passed away. And she was the mother that Tzemach Tzedek was a little boy, 3 years old at the time. And the Alter Rebbe promised her that he was going to raise the Tzemach Tzedek like his own child. And the Tzemach Tzedek was always in the Alter Rebbe's room because he was constantly around him and he raised him. And eventually he became the 3rd Rebbe of Chabad. In every generation, there were different challenges. That one of the biggest challenges in the generation of the Tzemach Tzedek, I would say there were 2 things, major things. One was something coming from the non-Jews, from the Tsar's government, and that is that that in the Tsar made a new decree, which is called Kantonistan, that every child at a certain age, I'm not sure, 7 or 8 years old, has to be given to or at least a number of children from each community have to be given to the Tsar to join his army. And his reasoning was, in order for an army to be successful, in order for soldiers to be at the highest level of success, they have to be training from their very young as their children. The real reason, the hidden agenda was to convert Jewish children to Christianity. And unfortunately, thousands of kids were taken away. And a lot of the children, they tried to force them to accept Christianity. They were fighting it. Some children were beaten, some children were killed. And a lot of children were great heroes. They stood up against all these difficulties. But the Tzemach Tzedek created a network of underground activity to save these children, which means Hasidim found a way to get into these army camps and snatch the children away and bring them back to their parents. And it appears that tens of thousands of children were saved through the Tzemach Tzedek. We don't know details because this was something which goes against the government, against everything that they did had to be done in absolute secrecy. So we don't know much of the details. But this is also what led to the passing of the Untitled Rebbe. The Untitled Rebbe was heard about this decree, and he went to the Ohel of the Alter Rebbe to daven to Hashem that decree should be nullified. And he was so pained and such anguish from knowing about this that this led to his passing. In fact, I'm not sure if this story is really, if it's authentic or not, but this is the story that I heard. That was the sort of the last straw that broke the camel's back, was that when he was traveling and he was in the house, and there was a woman that was screaming and begging the Rebbe to help her. And she was screaming that her child was just snatched away from them, taken to the army, and she was screaming and crying and begging and pleading that the Untitled Rebbe should save her child. And the Untitled Rebbe was so pained and by this tragedy that he became sick, and that led to his passing. So the Tzemach Tzedek, that was one challenge they had. The second challenge he had was with the Enlightenment movement. The Enlightenment movement is a movement that a very big part of our history. And this is the source of the Reform movement. This is the source of what led to so many thousands and probably millions of Jews that assimilated. It was actually started by a frum Jew, a religious Jew. His name was Moshe Mendelssohn, and he was from Germany. And the movement was started in Germany. And the movement was sort of to modernize Yiddishkeit. And he was a person that, he was, like I said, he put on tefillin, he davened 3 times a day, went to shul, observed mitzvahs, but he believed very strongly that Jews have to sort of become part of the non-Jewish community, go to universities. The Jews have to have their names, like have non-Jewish secular names. They have to become part of the other communities, and then they'll be accepted. There won't be any anti-Semitism. And that's interesting to observe that he in Germany preached that the more we sort of assimilate, the more we'll be loved and accepted by the nations of the world. And where did the worst anti-Semitism come from? From Germany. So obviously that was a wrong philosophy, but his philosophy led many Jews to leave Torah study, be excited to be accepted in universities and colleges instead of learning Torah. And in these places, they became influenced by their environment and they assimilated. In fact, he himself had seven sons that all of them converted to Christianity. So this was in Germany. During the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, there was somebody by the name of Lilienthal, and he was sent from Germany to Russia to start spreading the Enlightenment movement in Russia. And naturally, that would cause Jews in Russia to abandon Yiddishkeit and to abandon true Torah Yiddishkeit. And that was a very big challenge because these people came to the government and said the Hasidic Jews and the Orthodox Jews, they're too much attached to their old ways. We are modern and we are more aligned with the Russian government. We'll work with you, you'll work with us. And basically the government supported them. And they tried to incorporate a lot of things which would go against Torah through Judaism. There were two things which they fought for many years, and all the Rebbes of Chabad fought it off and it never happened. What that was they wanted to incorporate as a legal law in Russia that a person cannot become a rabbi of a community unless they went to their seminary where they teach distorted Torah. And a teacher can't teach children unless they got a diploma from their seminary where they teach Torah in a distorted way. So basically they had it right. You know what? That if we could undermine the teachers of children and undermine the rabbis of communities, then unfortunately you will undermine all of Yiddishkeit. That's what they were fighting for. And the Tzemach Tzedek fought them. And by fighting them, he was really fighting the government because the government supported them. And at one point, Tzemach Tzedek was arrested 22 times and was considered treason, that he's going against the government. And even though he wasn't physically in a jail, but he was house arrested 22 times. And this was the second thing that was his big challenge. Eventually, Lilienthal was accused of doing something against the government, and he ran away from Russia, and he came to the United States, and he settled in the state of Ohio, in Cincinnati, and that's where he established the Reform movement in America. He was the one. Tzemach Tzedek is also the author of the famous saying, "Think good, it'll be good." That comes from the Tzemach Tzedek. So the Tzemach Tzedek had 7 sons, and it's interesting that the one who became the next Rebbe was the youngest of all the 7 sons. Our Rebbe is a descendant of Tzemach Tzedek, but he's a descendant of the oldest of all the sons, Baruch Shalom. And he also had 2 daughters. One of the Tzemach Tzedek wrote many books of Chassidus, and he also wrote Responsa in Halacha. There's a whole set of books which are written by the Tzemach Tzedek on Halacha. So the youngest son of the Tzemach Tzedek became the next Rebbe, whose name was Reb Shmuel. And Reb Shmuel, or known as the Rebbe Marash, is the one who used to say Lechatchila Riber. I'm not sure everybody knows what that means, but we should all know what it means. And basically his quote was that out there in the world, they say, if you can't go under, then you go over. And I say, Lechatchila, to begin with, just go over it. Not that you try to go the regular way and it doesn't work. Now, he's not talking about getting on a plane without buying a ticket. He's talking about challenges in life. If you can't fight those challenges, then you just try to go above it and ignore it and just do what you have to do. And he said, my approach is lechatchila, you just go above it. Don't give attention and substance to challenges. Just move ahead. And there's a lot of details to him, but this is what he taught. And one of the things that's unique about the Rebbe Marash was that he conducted himself in a miraculous way, similar to the Baal Shem Tov. The Rebbes of Chabad definitely performed miracles, but they didn't perform such open miracles. Even when they performed the miracle, they made an effort to camouflage it. The only Rebbe which was different was the Rebbe Marash. And he used to perform the miracles, but in a very open way, openly tell people that he knew what they were thinking, he knew what happened in the past, he would tell them what's going to happen in the future. And obviously there's an explanation why he was different than the other Rebbes, but it had to do with his approach of L'chatchila River as well. Physically, the Rebbe Marash was actually not very healthy. And in fact, he lived the youngest, the least of all the Rebbes of Chabad. He lived to the age of 48. And he was a Rebbe just for a small amount, 17 years. We don't have a picture of the Rebbe Marash. We don't have a picture of the Mittel Rebbe. These two Rebbes, we don't have pictures. But we do know that the Rebbe Marash had a striking resemblance to the previous Rebbe when he was that age. In fact, there's a story told that the Frierdiker Rebbe in 1929 visited Eretz Yisrael. And when he visited Eretz Yisrael, you can imagine all the Lubavitcher Hasidim in the whole country came to see the Frierdiker Rebbe. But in 1929, there was still some older Hasidim that still remembered the Rebbe Marash. And one of the Hasidim walked into the room. When he saw the Frierdiker Rebbe, he fainted. Why did he faint? Because he thought he saw the Rebbe Marash. His image, physical image, was the resemblance was striking. And there's another story which is too long to tell now, but we'll tell a little bit about a person who became about tshuva, which really it was as a result of something the Rebbe Marash told him, but it was finalized through seeing the previous Rebbe. When he saw the previous Rebbe, he was in shock, and he said right away, "You must be either a son or a grandson of the Rebbe Marash." And then he turned around and changed his life. So the Rebbe Marash had 4 children. One of them unfortunately passed away very young at the age of 8. And it's interesting, at the age of 8, he turned out to be brilliant, knew things that is impossible to imagine that an 8-year-old would know. And he was very naturally broken that a child of 8 had passed away. And he expressed his feelings to his father, the Tzemach Tzedek, that the reason why it happened was because of something that he did. And the Tzemach Tzedek told him it's not true. And actually, this child was a reincarnation of the Alter Rebbe. And for whatever reason, the Alter Rebbe's neshama had to be in this world another 8 years, and that was his son. That was the Rebbe Marash. The next Rebbe is Reb Shalom Dolber. So again, the Rebbe Marash had 4 sons. The one was a child. The other 3, the one who became the Rebbe was not the oldest son in this case, but the middle son. Yes, there was a lot going on that the Hasidim couldn't have a Rebbe for 10 years because each one of the sons didn't want to accept. Each one said, go to the other one. So the Rebbe Rashab said, go to my older brother. The older brother said, go to my younger brother. And as a result of that, for 10 years, there was no real person leading openly the Chassidim. So the Rebbe Marash, the Rebbe Rashab, like every Rebbe, had something unique that was his unique contribution. And his unique contribution, not Chas v'Shalom, everything was unique, but I'm saying one thing that stands out was the yeshiva that he established called Tomchei Tmimim, which was a new concept, never known before. A yeshiva for young men to study both in the same yeshiva, and to study the revealed part of Torah and the hidden part of Torah. So that yeshiva, the order of learning started at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it finished 11 o'clock at night. And they learned 2 hours Chassidus in the morning, 2 hours of Chassidus at night, and 7 hours of Gemara during the day.
Thank you for not making that a schedule here.
What was that?
I said thank you for not making that a schedule here.
Oh, I was just reconsidering. Okay.
I think it'd be very nice.
No, I'm going to Ghana. No.
So I guess what was unique was not just the hours. The uniqueness was it's hard to imagine, but up until that time, young yeshiva bachrim would not study Chassidus. They just studied Gemara, Halacha, and not so much Chassidus. They would study a little bit of Tanya and a mimer maybe once in a few months. Today, here, women like yourselves are studying Tanya and Maimorim for hours. In those days, it was hardly done. So this was revolutionary that the Rebbe Rashab introduced, that young men who are still young in their spiritual growth these are men that are studying Chassidus so many hours. But he said something which is a clear prophecy. He said the young men are going to be neiris lahoyer. They're supposed to be candles that'll be giving off light. And he said these words over 100 years ago. I have been guaranteed that the student that will come out of this yeshiva eventually will be spread in the four corners of the world, and they'll be spreading Yiddishkeit and spreading the Amunah in Mashiach in the four corners of the world. And he said, we're going to be going through two major stages. This is incredible what he said, an open prophecy, two major stages. There'll be one stage, which is going to be a time that there'll be Jews who will be fighting Torah, fighting mitzvahs, fighting Yiddishkeit, and these students will be at the head of those that'll defend Torah and mitzvahs. And this was alluding to the communists and the Jewish communists who unfortunately fought to uproot Yiddishkeit in Russia. And then he said there'll be another stage where there'll be Jews who are observant Jews. They do learn Torah, they do learn mitzvahs, but they will be fighting the involvement with the Amunah in Mashiach. And it'll be their mission to bring that Amunah and the purest Amunah in Mashiach to the rest of the world. And Rebbe Rashab also had a unique way of teaching Chassidus, which is compared to the Rambam. Like what the Rambam did for halacha and Torah in general to organize everything in a organized, structured way, that's what the Rebbe Rashab did in the realm of Chassidus. We come to the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, his generation, he was a one and only son. The Rebbe Rashab had no daughters and no other sons. This is the only child. And he became the next Rebbe in 1920. But his leadership was in the most difficult time, maybe in all of Jewish history, definitely in the history of all the Rabbeim. The two biggest tragedies in history, one was what came from the Nazis, and the other was the communists. And it was all in those years that he was Rebbe, between the years of 1920 and the 1950, those 30 years. And his avodah was basically to spread Yiddishkeit and strengthen Yiddishkeit under those most difficult circumstances. And he went through three major stages. One stage was living in Russia under the communist regime. The second stage was living in Poland, which created a different kind of challenge. Poland had their own Hasidim and their own Hasidic Rebbes, which was a different approach than Chabad. So that was also met with a lot of challenges, learning Chabad and teaching Chabad in Poland. But nevertheless, a lot of young men became Hasidim and were learning Hasidus Chabad. And the third was when he came to America in 1940, the last 10 years of his life, where he was dealing with assimilation, and here to spread Yiddishkeit and establish institutions that would strengthen Yiddishkeit. So he also was the first one to bring an awareness that we're living in the times that we're approaching Mashiach. And he had a slogan, which was La'alta L'tshuva, La'alta L'geula, which means if we do tshuva immediately, then this brings geula immediately. And he's also the one, the Frierdiker Rebbe, that wrote, had us write a Sefer Torah, and he said, with this Torah scroll, we're going to greet Mashiach. That's the Torah scroll in 770. It's called Mashiach Sefer Torah. It was written specifically with the intention that when Mashiach comes, we'll be greeting Mashiach with this with his Torah scroll. And the Frierdiker Rebbe, when he's in Russia, he took 9 students into his room and he said to them, I want to make a covenant with you. I'm going to be the 10th, and together with you, we have a minyan. And that is that everyone who's part of this covenant is going to fight for Yiddishkeit under all circumstances. And he used the term until the last drop of blood. And they all took it upon themselves. And these were the main activists underground spreading Yiddishkeit in Russia under blood. We don't even know who they are. Could you imagine? People had such an amazing mission. We know maybe 1 or 2 or 3, but we don't know really who the whole group was. And we don't know their names. It was all held in secrecy. It was not about getting honor to them or to their children, because this was all done in secrecy. And some of them, unfortunately, lost their lives. And some of them continued to live and came out and were in America. One of them is the grandfather of Rabbi Simon Jacobson, Yossi Jacobson. Their grandfather was one of the 10 people. That's what they say. And others would just not show who they were exactly. But this was the Avodah in the Frierdiker Rebbe's times. Our generation, which is the Rebbe's generation, we can go on and talk to no end. But basically, the Rebbe took all the Hasidus of all the generations, of all the Rebbe, and he spread it globally like was never known before. So now, he just had a convention of all the Shluchim. What does it mean, Shluchim? These are people that are spread in all 4 corners of the world, about 4,000 or 5,000 Shluchim. And each one is spreading Chassidus where they are, spreading Yiddishkeit where they are. And basically all the things that Chassidus teaches, which up until now was somewhat more in a limited way, the Rebbe took it to the end. And being that the whole purpose of Chassidus is to bring Mashiach, the Rebbe takes that also to the end, bringing it to fruition, that this is the generation, and that's what we're holding now, to bring the coming of Mashiach to actuality. And the more we spread Chassidus, the more we spread Yiddishkeit, that's going to make it actually happen. So this is known and referred to as the 7 branches of the Menorah. Each Rebbe is another branch in the Menorah. Don't ask me which Rebbe is what, but each Rebbe is another branch of the Menorah. All of them together bring tremendous light into the world. And this light is the light that's going to get rid of the darkness of Golus and bring in the light of Mashiach. And if you ask me, today is a perfect day for Mashiach to come. It's Yutas Kislev. People are already wearing their Shabbos clothes and they're all set and prepared. So that Hashem help that it should happen today. And we'll see all the Rabbeim and we'll hear more from them.
Who's the Shamish?
L'chaim. Which Shamish?
7 candles with Shamish.
Oh, who's the Shamish? I don't know. Good question. Actually,